Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something we do absolutely every single day, usually without a second thought. We're breaking down the mechanics of speech acts. Now, we typically think of language as just a simple tool to pass along information, right? But beneath the surface, there's actually a highly structured, almost invisible matrix of rules, where the things we say are literally physical actions. So let's explore how our words are doing a whole lot more than just speaking. Okay, think about this classic, super relatable question. Can you pass the salt? Now imagine an alien landed on Earth and analyzed our grammar perfectly. They'd probably think you're genuinely curious about that other person's physical strength or their ability to lift a salt shaker. But you know, and I know, you aren't asking about their physical fitness. You just want the salt. This one simple question completely shatters the assumption that our sentences are just conveyors of literal information. So, what's really happening here? Well, there's often this massive gap between a sentence's grammar form and its real-world function. With "can you pass the salt," the form is interrogative. It's a question. But its communicative function? That's an imperative. It's a command, or at least a polite request. Discourse analysis teaches us that what a sentence looks like and what it actually does are fundamentally two different things. Here's our roadmap for today. 1. Words are actually actions. 2. Reading between the lines. 3. Classifying human communication. 4. When cultures collide. And finally, 5. Teaching the rules of talk. Section 1. Words are actually actions. To really wrap our heads around this, we need to look at something called performatives. A performative is a very special type of verb where the very act of uttering the word is the physical action itself. Think about that for a second. You aren't just describing the world around you. Your words are actively changing it in real time. This groundbreaking idea was brought to the table back in the 1960s by philosopher J.L. Austin. In his brilliantly titled book, How to Do Things with Words, Austin completely shifted the entire paradigm of linguistics. See, before him, everyone was just obsessing over whether sentences were grammatically correct or factually true. But Austin argued that we need to look at the functional value of our utterances. Basically, we use language to perform acts. Let's look at a few of Austin's performatives in action. I named this ship the Queen Elizabeth. I bet you $50. I order you to leave. You kind of see the pattern here, right? They generally require a first-person singular pronoun, I, and the active voice in the present tense. When you say I bet you aren't describing a bet that happened yesterday. The sentence literally is the bet. The words themselves do the physical action. Section 2. Reading between the lines. But human beings are incredibly complicated, and let's be real, we rarely speak in direct performatives. We like to dance around things. And that brings us to illocutionary force, which is the speaker's hidden intention behind an utterance. Say someone asks you, "Would you like to wash the dishes?" They absolutely aren't casually inquiring about your personal hobbies or asking if dishwashing brings you deep spiritual joy. The literal meaning is a question, but the illocutionary force? That's a direct request, or honestly, a command, just start cleaning up. So, how do we unconsciously recognize all these hidden intentions without getting confused? Austin argued it comes down to felicity conditions. These are basically a cycle of logical rules needed for a speech act to be happy or valid, instead of just totally failing. First, you need a general condition, meaning everyone actually understands the language, and specific propositional content. But crucially, it relies on a preparatory condition, meaning the action won't just magically happen by itself, and a sincerity condition, meaning the speaker genuinely intends to follow through. Finally, the essential condition dictates what the utterance actually counts for in the real world. If any of these rules break down, the whole act fails. Section 3. Classifying human communication. Now, since there are literally thousands of ways we use language to perform actions, linguists naturally wanted to organize the whole shebang. John Searle did this brilliantly with his famous 1976 taxonomy. He divided speech acts into 5 neat categories based on our psychological states and our attempts to make our words match the world. Look at directives, for example, getting a hearer to act, like requesting, or commissives, committing to future action, like making a promise or even a threat. Declarations are wild because they literally change reality the moment they're spoken out loud, like saying, "I declare you man and wife." It is an incredibly powerful way to map human psychology directly onto language. Section 4. When cultures collide. So what happens when this delicate machinery breaks down in the real world? Well, it can be disastrous. Let me tell you about a real case from the 1950s in the UK. A man named Derek Bentley was under arrest by the police. His accomplice, Chris Craig, was standing there holding a gun. Bentley shouted to his accomplice, "Let him have it, Chris." Hearing this, Craig shot and tragically killed a policeman. But think about the illocutionary force of that sentence for a second. Did it mean shoot him? Or did it mean hand over the gun to the police? The prosecution argued it meant shoot. The judge agreed, and Bentley was executed for a pragmatic ambiguity. It was a deeply tragic, real-world misunderstanding of a speech act. While most breakdowns thankfully aren't a matter of life and death, they do happen to us constantly, especially when we travel or work globally. We call this cross-cultural pragmatic failure. And the absolute key takeaway here is that this failure isn't about using bad grammar. Not at all. It happens when you perfectly translate the literal words of your native language, but accidentally copy-paste your native social rules straight into a completely new culture. Let's look at how wildly different these cultural conventions can be. In an Anglo culture, a manager might criticize a worker directly, but a Thai manager, they might do this privately or use very general terms just to save face. Here's a fun one. If you are in certain French-speaking cultures and you need the toilet, you might politely ask if you can wash your hands. But if you translate that literally into English, a native speaker might just be super confused and point you to a sink. Or imagine you're in an Arabic culture and you just profusely compliment someone's beautiful watch. In that context, your compliment actually carries the pragmatic force of a request. You might accidentally obligate them to take it off and hand it over to you as a gift. No way, right? But it happens. Section 5. Teaching the rules of talk. If these rules are so hidden and so culturally specific, how do linguists even study them? And more importantly, how do we teach them? Researchers generally use 3 main methods to gather speech act data, though honestly, the perfect method doesn't really exist. The armchair method just relies on a researcher's own intuition. It's super easy, but highly biased. The field method observes authentic, real-world interactions as they happen, which is great, but it is incredibly time-consuming. And finally, the laboratory method, which uses role play and surveys, gives huge volumes of data really fast, but it can be highly artificial. Because this data is so complex, modern instructed pragmatics isn't about sitting you down and forcing you to memorize a massive list of cultural rules. Instead, it's about making you an ethnographer of human interaction. The goal is to cultivate awareness. You observe real-world consequences, contrast them with your own native habits, and really analyze exactly what happens when things go wrong. And this leads us to a really beautiful concept for anyone trying to navigate a new language or culture: the third place. Learners don't have to completely erase their own identity to speak perfectly. You don't have to totally submit to the target culture's norms. Instead, you can navigate a middle ground. It's a unique space between your native culture and the new one, where you construct your own identity while still being perfectly successfully understood. Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on today. Should a language learner assimilate entirely to a new culture's hidden rules, or is it better to carve out a third place of their very own? The next time you ask someone to pass the salt or compliment a friend's new watch, just remember, you aren't simply speaking, you are acting upon the world. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the hidden matrix of your daily conversations.